Thanks, Erin, and thanks to all of you. It's been an amazing day, and I know we're getting towards the end of it, but hopefully this will be a valuable and informative panel discussion, as were the earlier ones. As Erin said, I'm the Head of Evidence and Innovation at the Alcohol and Drug Foundation and the sponsor for this program. Just like to acknowledge the Australian Government for the opportunity through the funding. Without them, it wouldn't be possible, and I think all of us in this room share a commitment and passion for those family and friends out there that are supporting a loved one or a friend with their alcohol and other drug use. And we found when we did our kind of primary research at the start that there is so many family and friends out there battling with supporting a loved one, and many are, waiting too long to take action. But we also know that there's some fantastic work that's going on the ground, and that's really the background to this piece of work and why it's been fantastic to hear from the practice area this morning and now this afternoon, the research projects, and we'll unpack that a little bit more. Just a little bit about me. So I started my career as an AOD clinician, working firsthand with people who use alcohol and other drugs, as well as family and friends. So I certainly share that passion. And probably more recently, over the last kind of 15 years, in that gap between practice and research, and how do we really close that practice research gap, which is widely kind of talked about at about 18 years. So I think it's really exciting to be here today and going, hey guys, we've got shared common agenda. We're facing similar kind of challenges and opportunities, and how do we, contribute to the evidence base so we can learn what works and make a difference in the lives of others. So just one final acknowledgement, and then I'm going to ask my first question, which is I'd just like to acknowledge those with lived experience of supporting a family and friend with their alcohol and other drug use, and also those who have had challenges with their alcohol and other drug use. My first question for the panel is, having kind of sat back this morning and heard about some of those practice programs that are going on in terms of supporting family and friends, I'd just love to hear from any of you on any kind of reflections that you've had about, I think there'd be a real opportunity there to contribute to the evidence base, acknowledging that obviously the methods are different, the process is different, but acknowledging that you can get smaller pieces of research to contribute to the evidence base. Any reflections from any of panel members? Who's willing to go first?
Okay. All projects are fantastic and all data is amazing. So even if you are only doing a small evaluation in your practice, something that you might find may lead to a bigger study, may inspire other people, so keep doing your research.
Terrific, thank you. It's good advice.
I think
Next.
I was just going to say that, practice and research, we need more of that in terms of praxis, the integration of research and practice together, because you really can't have one without the other. And I think, without practice, you wouldn't know what to research, and without the research, you wouldn't know how to innovate practice. Mm-hmm. So, if I had to, put my advice or opinion there, it'd be like keep practicing and track and reflect, because critical reflection makes better research as well when it comes to, researching on the ground.
Terrific, thank you. Anyone else want to add to that?
I just have one comment, that I think our project was a good example of what you mentioned, that we started 2 years ago a very tiny evaluation project, and that was the first of its kind in the NT, because in that space the evidence was totally missing. And from that project, working together with the NT-LEN Lived Experience Network, this is like the third funding that we can secure together, and everything is just coming from that basic, very tiny project with a lot of in-kind work from the researchers and from the peer workers as well.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you. I think that's really encouraging. And the thing I would add to the question this morning, which was, how do we get better collaboration between research and practice? And I would just say, find that common ground. Like, we all have our own organisational priorities, our research focus areas and things, but if we can network and look for shared and common interests, it's a good place to start. A kind of broader reflection from the panel, just around collaboration. How has partnering with other organisations that you've worked with been beneficial to your process? Because a number of the projects, there was clearly...
I can comment on that Smart Recovery wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these collaborations. Effectively, we're heavily reliant and in a very positive way to work with hundreds of organisations across Australia. Such a small team of 6 of us, and there's only 2 trainers. But that's exciting because you can kind of get caught in your own little world as well, and it is important to share experiences and learnings from for other viewpoints of different organisations and different kind of service deliveries as well. So it's for us, we wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I find it really grounding, like to go and talk to the workers and find out what's going on and going, well, what can we do to help? And, we're a cog in the wheel to try and make the world a better place. That sort of feel-good sort of stuff. Yeah, it helps me keep focused, I reckon. Yeah.
We had something similar experience. So this collaboration with the Lived Experience Network gave us an opportunity to co-design those deficits-based survey tools. And also because the participants, through the co-design process, they became motivated to be involved, their voice was heard. So they were really happy to share their stories. And we are just collecting data, but what we experienced from a previous project was like they really wanted to share their stories, and they wanted to collaborate and contribute to the evaluation. So nearly all of the previous participants were willing to participate in the evaluation as well, because they wanted to be their voice to be heard.
Great, thank you.
I'll just touch on that. I think being able to come together today and hear from so many organisations, and particularly for us being able to work, teaming up with Monash University, it's given us an opportunity, I think, to think and to be able to potentially work together, to bring about change for families, and that's what this is all about. We have to remember that we're dealing with human beings, and having that evidence, of course, is from families themselves is really, really important, and it's fantastic to hear today. For us, part of the benefit of collaborating in this process has been about being able to plan well, being able to communicate effectively, and I think we've seen evidence of that today from everyone as well. And just providing a platform for families to connect and know that they're not alone, and being able to navigate some of the challenges that have come up today as well, together collectively.
Great, thanks everyone. Just the next question, I think it's a good segue to this next question, which is future work. We'd love to hear from any of you that have kind of thought about where to next, and I think it's been great to hear about some of the examples of projects growing as we learn more and test more and learn more from people that we work with and serve. Anyone willing to share their thoughts on where to from here?
We've evolved organically from the first participants have driven the direction that the future programs have taken. And I think it'd be great to be able to have some flexibility in funding to be able to continue to let things take their natural course. The peers themselves, as being the person that with AOD issues, has been the one that's identified that the families needed support, and that's how we've ended up in the space we're in now.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I think, look, we know that substance use is still a major issue throughout Australia. and that the impact on families is still huge and the need for support's only increasing. I think, particularly as a result of our project, you know, being able to consider online support and face-to-face sort of post-COVID is something that's really come out as a positive for us as a future, you know, in future workings, and, you know, the potentially the scope to be able to deliver on a bigger scale.
So just to add on to that, I guess it's really important to keep revisiting what does service provision look like for people who are impacted and are in caring positions, because the thing is that, you know, findings are always changing and the environment is constantly changing, and there's going to be challenges that, you know, weren't foreseen, and so it's really important to look at new and innovative ways to engage families and friends, but also, you know, not just homogenizing the group and really taking a cultural perspective to it too. And you know, looking for more innovative ways to engage more populations is really crucial. Not just about gender, but more that sort of intersectional approach. You know, because again, you know, what about males from multicultural backgrounds, and what about LGBTQI communities and all the other stuff? Because again, it's not a homogenous group. We can say, yep, you know, this is it. It's constantly changing and evolving, and we need to be open about what is working. But the way we do that is, you know, through constant reflection and looking at who's coming through the doors of services and what is happening on the ground. And again, going back to that sort of collaborative approach again, because this is not a one service approach that, you know, we can all do this. We need to all work together to share information as opposed to just existing silo.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. I mean, I was really impressed with all the projects here today. And obviously we all work on our own little thing, but I think if we all talk to each other, we all communicate together, we can help support people better, because there isn't one size fits all treatment. Yeah, and this is why just being here together today is great, and we can help brainstorm, for example, how to get more males into research and into capacity building grants.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. And I think that's another good kind of segue into this next question, which is lessons learnt. And as we've talked about now, there's been some common themes, you know, in the data, both from the earlier sessions and today, about hard to reach populations and, you know, taking a gendered lens approach, taking a culturally sensitive approach. And I think whilst we want to know what works, we always want to be experimenting to kind of test how to reach those people and learn from that. Any other lessons from the panel that you've kind of taken away from this project that you'll kind of carry with you moving forward?
It's hard because it's really hard to quantify this stuff. You know, it's really relationship based. Like it's communicating. It's, you know, talking through how we're going to do this, and yeah, how do I write that into a paper? Right, you know, but that's what really stands out for me, and yeah.
So just a follow-up question on that, Nicole. Would you say that's quite unique for your context in terms of working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, or you think that's generic across all cultures?
It's everyone. It's people. Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, it's everyone. Yeah. But, you know, in working in Aboriginal communities, you know, it is about building that rapport and trust, first and foremost. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other learnings from anyone?
I think the concept of time as well, when we're building relationships, you know, when you see new programs rolling out and new initiatives, even new research projects, you know, and at first it's great because, you know, you're getting something new that's out there and you're putting it into practice, or you're trying to introduce it to on the ground. But I think, you know, going back to Nicole's point about that relational approach, you know, like how long is a piece of string versus how long can I build that rapport with the community, particularly in the, multicultural space where, trust is a big thing, like all relationships anyway. And so, if clients don't go through the door, it doesn't mean that the service is not there, not needed. In fact, maybe it is, and then there needs to be more utilisation. But maybe we're asking the wrong questions here. We're not asking the right questions, perhaps. And maybe if we switch the questions up as opposed to, what has gotten you to, use drugs as opposed to what is keeping you there? What is keeping you utilising substances for families? And what is keeping the family member stuck in that pattern of, not engaging in services? And those are bigger questions, I guess, to reflect on. But, if we don't ask, where's the answer? So I think continuously reflecting on that and then, incorporating praxis is going to be pivotal.
Yes, great. Anyone?
Just wanted to touch on what you said. Everything you say really resonates with me, and I feel like I don't express myself as well. There are definitely some barriers for family members and friends who are trying to seek help for themselves, and one of the ones that's continuously come up today is around stigma and shame. And I have to admit, before I started working this field, I never even thought that friends and family members were affected by the shame of a loved one's AOD use. Didn't even consider it a thing. And I do agree with NCETA's plan that, we do need to see a more systemic change about how we talk about AOD use, breaking down that stigma barrier that is stopping people from seeking help. Sorry, Siri.
Siri's not happy.
I'll try better. But I think that we all here really understand that stigma and shame is a huge barrier, but everyone out there doesn't. They think that stigma and shame only affects the person who is using. And I would love to see more rhetoric, more discussion about this, and just some changes in the general population.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Also, so when we talk about stigma and shame, I can't help but reflect on self-care. And I know we always talk about self-care, but we really need to kind of rehash that to the family and friends, because a lot of the times when you're stuck in a caring role or you are caring for someone, you're in an emotional mind, right? You're stuck in this emotional mind of like, I need to fix the problem, I need to do this, I need to do that, I'm not doing enough. And these are all core beliefs that come from just being in that space. And a lot of times what happens is that the routines of what that person has to engage in self-care starts to dwindle away, and then they forget how to practice it, because at the end of the day, it's a behaviour. And so we need to consistently introduce that and bring that out. So if we're practicing on the ground and working directly with family and friends, we need to introduce self-care strategies from a skill perspective of how do we actually do that. Because again, the shame and the guilt reinforce not doing that. And so we need to normalise that a little bit more as well.
Yeah, great. I think one of the reflections that I've heard from listening to all of you is, there is no one size fits all. It is so important to approach things with curiosity, always looking to learn, adopting co-design approaches, all of those sorts of things. And also from our perspective, like funding different projects online, face-to-face, looking at rural, regional versus metro, different cultural groups is kind of really important and will be really important moving forward. I suppose it's kind of down to the final comments. Anything that you'd like to share that we haven't covered off? This is your shot.
I guess it's with bias that I say that peers within your recruiting is the key to engaging with the people that we're aiming to get into our programs. There's that natural sense of non-judgmental understanding, and it's a really powerful tool to use peer workers in this space.
Just having that someone who's been through it and knows exactly, or at least somewhat, how you're feeling.
Absolutely.
Yes. I think I just want to touch on something that Glenn said earlier. we really need to remember that this is about humans. There's a person behind the substance, and really focusing on that person and the family members rather than, alcohol and drugs. Is there anything you want to add to that, Glenn? I know he's got some good comments.
No. I think it's just, I think it's just humanising it, and remembering that, as all of us sort of perhaps can reflect on today, that for families to realise that they're not alone, and I think that's, one of the key things behind, today's session and how we move forward from here.
I think just really changing our mindsets and language about what we're doing here. Even at SMART, we're trying to challenge ourselves even to the word addiction, because the World Health Organization did a cross-cultural study, and drugs is the most stigmatizing condition out of an array of them. So, and we work with not just substance use, but any problematic behaviour. And when you work with the individuals and break down the mechanisms that drive them to do that, it's no different from methamphetamine to sitting in front of a TV, eating chocolate and watching Netflix. Do you know, the constructs and the rationales and the conditioned patterns that drive you to do that are very similar. So I think language is really key to try and reducing that stigma and just working on a normal, as you say, a normal human discussion, that this is just a behaviour. It just happens that this behaviour has significant consequences in X, Y, and Z. But if we can create that, I think it also creates a space for conversation where males or whoever it is they're not engaging in, and it just sees this as just a normal part, just as you go to a doctor because your foot's broken. You go somewhere else because there's something else not quite functioning in your life and you're not achieving the things you'd hope to achieve. So I think it's really, really important we keep challenging ourselves around even just the simple language we use. Like, we don't use the terms addicts and things like that, or even the word addiction, because, I don't have an addiction. Therefore, it stops me actually engaging in services up to 6 years, it shows research. That's frightening, just because of the language we use and the mindsets that's been driven through policy and media, and I think that needs to change all different areas. So.
Yeah, family members have got that internalised stigma as well, and that's really heady, and that it permeates everything for them. It's the shame, it's the guilt, it's can't believe it, that's my son, my daughter, and they're a druggie, that's devastating, that type of language. Yeah.
And I think, as I referred to earlier, when we did that research at the start of the project to understand the needs and barriers, etc., for family and friends, stigma was definitely a major barrier. So just to reiterate, we've got about 5 minutes to take any questions from the floor. Gino, I know at the back, has had his hand up for a little bit. So, okay. There's a few. We'll try and get through as many as we can.
Okay. Thank you. It'll be quick. Just to the panel, a lot of the presentations had very small numbers, and I'm just wondering whether the future for research in this area is, rather than focus on individual organisations and the service they provide, you focus on the interventions like support groups across a number of organisations, so you can get the numbers up rather than just trying to say, this is what FDS does, this is what Shark does, this is... Because they're very similar. The program's breakthrough is similar to a program offered at FDS, and I'm sure there are similarities around the country. I also am a bit concerned about the bleeding into and the overstepping the mark of universities into delivering services, and whether they should step back and evaluate the services rather than deliver and evaluate, and whether the delivery of those services should be left to the community-based services or the funded services for direct intervention.
Well, I can only speak on our project, and the researchers weren't part of the delivery at all, to answer that part of the question. From what I understand, the funding was specific, to organisations to apply for. So perhaps a broader approach, could, for sure,
pilot stuff. That's piloting stuff as that's how it works. Yeah, we've got to test it out first before we go trying to get enormous numbers. That's time, energy, money. So if we've got something good with a pilot, then we can move on. Yeah, do bigger scale stuff.
I think if you look at more longitudinal studies as well,
Yeah.
a lot of these grants are like, all right, you're going to spend months on your ethics approval and this and that, and you've got like a week to advertise it. Well, that's not going to work, is it? So maybe we need to lobby on getting grants that actually go over a 5-10 year period and collaborate with multiple organisations to do that. But whatever flavour of the month the politicians have, that's what will end up driving the need, really.
We can't discount, while individually, small numbers, you take us together, that's a really large number of people we've been able to, test, for want of a better word, or, provide an intervention to. Yeah, so we were talking earlier about, how do we collate all of the findings and everything from this and all of the themes that have come out of it, because that, I think there's so much in that, what's come out of this and all the evidence that we've all got together. Yeah.
And I think it's more of the reflection of, the quality over the quantity, Again, it comes back to the research methodology being, if it's qualitative, it's not so much around the numbers thing, but more so how the research was done and the messaging that was there. And then you can always kind of build upon it, I guess, later.
I know there's like 3 or 4 other people with their hand up. We might have only time for 2 or 3.
We have time until 4:30, so we can take all the questions. I think we have quite a bit of time until refreshments. So, Erin's giving me a face. Maybe not. Okay, we'll go. Oh, okay, sure.
I'll be really quick. I know that you guys have all spoken a lot about adults today and the support that you give to adults. Obviously, we work with the youth, and you mentioned collaboration. We know that young people are obviously incredibly impacted by what they see in their environments, and we also know that intervention is key. So please get in touch with us, because we would love to work with the kids the kids of the parents that some of you are working with, so that we can help support them before that intergenerational trauma or decisions or impact continues.
Excellent. I was about to say, I guess this is a...
Can I have a comment on that? Can I?
Yeah.
Go for it. So yeah, if it's possible, we would like to get in touch with you, because the Circles of Support program has a version for young people, and Helen is delivering it in the community, mostly around the urban part of Darwin, but they are trying to reach further regions as well. So we would like.
Well, look at that. That's what we're here for.
Excellent question. Mine's sort of a question and reflection. It's interesting, when we start our programs, we often ask families in the room who's used a drug, coffee, cigarettes, and it's obviously a situation where families are self-medicating or coping as they best can do it, which involves their own alcohol and drug use, which we see quite often. It's not as though it's a separate thing, that it's their loved one who's using and they're not using a substance as well, which is an interesting area that we've not really explored. And the other one, of course, talking to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and life in general, we've all come from somewhere, is intergenerational trauma and the impact of that, and how that might be looked at too as something which is a perpetuating, reinforcing factor, which then chuck in shame and stigma, and you have quite a difficult thing. And we haven't sort of looked at those aspects. I'd be curious what that might look like in terms of further research and investigation.
Thanks, everyone. I wanted to give you a bit of a challenge, and it's more of a sort of forward-looking challenge, probably needs facilitation by ADF as well. I think today, I feel like, and this is also given the grants that were given out, the constraints that come with funding, it feels like everyone's kind of building on what Gino said. You know, we've all worked in isolation as small organisations or sometimes big universities, but working in small teams, and we've all seemed to have focused on the problem stage, like the acute stage, and you know, all the methods are pretty similar, pre-post. No one sort of has been able to eliminate selection bias, and there's all these things that I think are problematic across everyone's project because of the nature of the design, the funding design, and the timeframe we had. And I just wonder if we could, all get together and sort of, I know Erin talked about layering evidence, but you could almost, we've done a bit of layering. I wonder if we could go big and just almost think, okay, not just the problem stage where everyone's just talking about counselling, but what about if we find all the people that do cope well, and we go backwards and we go, well, what was it in their environment that supported them? So maybe we don't need to just think about service design, but we need to think about prevention, and we need to think about what are all those things, and could we unpack that, and could we, you know, instead of just focusing on teaching people skills, maybe there's other things that work really well for them, and it's prevention. And then I think, you know, everyone's getting people to opt into surveys, and we all know the problems with that, and we have massive selection bias. And so, you know, what could we do in terms of running more rigorous studies with a counterfactual and randomised control trials and get big samples with all of us combined? So I just think, I wonder if there's an opportunity to kind of get together later and almost have that 5-year funding pitch and do something really transformative rather than layering. You know, like go to that, think big.
I feel a workshop coming on.
Yeah, I think so.
Program
back
logic.
in Melbourne in a few months for another workshop. I don't know, because I feel really inspired, but I also feel frustrated that it's small scale and it's not satisfying in terms of the breadth of opportunities to change behaviour. It's, you know, there's going to be so many other things that could be really important, but I don't think on our own as individuals, organisations would be able to crack it. I feel like it would be a big job. Anyway, challenge to you.
I did have a question. Is that all right? So I work in the area of stigma a fair bit, and a few years ago was privileged enough to work on the Power of Words, which is our sort of big anti-stigma piece in the last 5 years. And I currently sit on an advisory group for another project that's focused on stigma, mental health and AOD. So there's a lot of buzz around breaking stigma, but my question to the panel is, how do we actually break it at the knees, or hit it at the knees where it hurts with stigma? Because it feels like an uphill battle, and we talk about it being an issue a lot, and I've just heard about it today from the perspective of service delivery and that sort of internalised stigma with family and friends and people who use drugs. So how, in your opinions, how do we start to really break it down? Sorry, final question, bit hard.
Decriminalise it.
We could learn from the mental health field. We've seen that education, if people have accurate knowledge about anxiety, depression, people don't feel so ashamed of their conditions and are more willing to seek help. So we could better educate people about alcohol and other drugs as a step. But then we also need to layer, that would probably only handle public stigma, wouldn't handle structural stigma and self-stigma.
I think celebrating the stories of the successes is going to be key. I was reflecting, as I say, partly on a presentation I did up in Brisbane. But when we do reflect on celebrities, you know, all these famous celebrities, even when you go back to Sigmund Freud and all these people that were cocaine users and all these things, we don't think of them as addicts. So we don't think of them that. We celebrate who they are and what they've done as people and behaviours that they've achieved. So I think, and I'm speaking from personal experience as well, coming through heroin addiction 20 years ago, part of my healing was, and also changing the mindsets of people around me, was me being able to share my story and allow people to see more than the label, because public policy and funding that goes into this, it's 60–70% is criminal, criminal justice. So it's a public health concern. So if we can create a space and a forum where we can celebrate these, not only just to inform us, but to inspire politicians and media and the community, then I think that's going to be a way that we can normalise this and move forward.
Terrific. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks to the panel for coming up and answering your questions. And I'm just going to hand back to Erin, who is going to make some final remarks.
Thanks, Craig. Sorry, Shayla, when you said we've got till 4:30, I thought, no, I've got to make final remarks. We can't just finish on 4:30 and walk out of the room because, gosh, when I reflect back to when we started this project, and I remember having a conversation with the team at the ADF about how do we best improve the support for family and friends when we actually don't really know a lot about what's out there. And we started talking with people across Australia about what services were being provided, and it was pretty clear that there was lots of activity but not a lot of connection. So we can sit here at the end of the day and at the end of this exercise and think about those transformative opportunities, or the idea of we need to combine our resources and our efforts so that we can build bigger studies, we can look at the commonalities between the different service models that we use for support. But 12 months ago, we didn't even know that those commonalities existed. So I think we've come a long way in the last 12 months. Certainly from an ADF perspective, I feel that we have a better understanding of what's happening. We have a better understanding of what's needed. We have a better understanding of what's working and what's not working. And I think from what I'm hearing from talking to people throughout the day, we're all feeling like that. We've been connected into others that share work, passion, beliefs and commitment to really helping families and friends of people who use alcohol and drugs to get the support and information they need at every stage of their recovery. And a lot of this conversation was about family and friends of people who have really significant dependency on alcohol and drugs, and how do we think about how we can support them much earlier to have those conversations very early and avoid that need to be working at that end. I've got so many questions. Steph, when you said we should be brainstorming, how do we reach into support men? Yes, how do we do that? How do we better connect younger carers, younger people experiencing the harms of alcohol and drug use from others to better be able to support themselves and support those people? How do we reach into culturally and linguistically diverse groups? More questions. I'm walking out with more questions than I had walking in, and that's a really good thing to end with at a symposium. You don't want to walk out with all problems solved, because then you probably haven't really solved them all. And I talked about layering up, and I think we've started to see the opportunities for us to build the evidence, connect in with others who might be asking similar questions, taking similar approaches, combine the data that we collect, use the outcome measures framework that NCETA have developed to start to collect common measures that will give us a larger data set over time. And then how do we support organisations to do evaluation every day? We've heard how hard it is, how time poor we are, how it takes us away from our clinical work when we're needing to collect measures. But if we don't collect measures, then how do we build a case for ongoing funding? And I think we've got some really good insights into the sorts of things that we can do together, not just the ADF, to start to build those sorts of tools to make that a little bit easier, and to really build a powerful case for support for the need for more to be done in this space. It struck me as curious that we heard quite a few people say we're funded to support people who use alcohol and drugs, not family and friends. And yet we know that they really do benefit from support and are part of that bigger ecosystem. And then I'm also interested in what can we do to help people connect with services. Like, I think about how many people in Australia know someone who has problems with alcohol and drug use. How many people we talk to, and I know that it's not just they're talking to me because I happen to be the CEO of the Alcohol and Drug Foundation, they were talking to me before then. My own personal experience with a family member who suffered a lifetime of alcohol dependence. I know that there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of people who need help and support, and we're not reaching them. So what is it that we need to unpack about why that's not happening? And we're getting the right services to the people who do need it, because we're hearing about that here today. But how do we reach those people that we're not reaching? How do we know what we don't know? And for me, that's probably the biggest question that I'm leaving with today. So you're right. What do we do next? Well, I'm not sure, let me be honest. I think we've still got a bit of work to do in finishing this project. So Kantar are going to be working with our capacity building grant recipients to pull together the findings of that. We've got ongoing conversations with the Australian government who funded this program over the last 3 years. We've got other projects that we do within the ADF that could lend itself to this, but I certainly know that we can't walk away and do nothing. So we need to think about what those next steps might look like and talk with all of you in the room about that, and all of you online. And I have to say to those people online, if you're still there, well done, and thank you. I hope you've had as much out of today as people in the room have. So just before I finish, just a bit of a thank you to some people. So I think we've acknowledged the tremendous support from the Australian government, the funding that they've provided to this program that allowed us to do this work and other work. It wouldn't have happened without that. The Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre, who actually, unbeknownst to us, went out and looked for a grant for us when we looked at this venue, found a small grant that meant that it really reduced the cost of using this facility. So I'd like to thank them, and the ADF team and all of you. So Shayla and Chris in particular, if you could just stand up. And Melinda, who was here earlier and has now started this project, so some of you will know Melinda. It has been an extraordinary accomplishment. Let me say I was very grateful that everything was so well organised, because I could just rock up here and do what I was told to do. Chris said he'd put little stars on the speakers' badges, and I said he and Shayla needed stars as well. And Eleanor, who's been working with them, Craig as program sponsor. Really huge piece of work. What you see in this room is only one small part of the Family and Friends program, so I can't finish without thanking them. And yes, just thank you to all of you for stepping up, for giving it a go, for the learning, the sharing. Thank you to the many people who participated in the research, the families and friends and the people who use drugs. Without those people, really, we wouldn't have the findings that we've got. So we're finishing the day with an opportunity for refreshments if people would like to stop and just reflect on learnings from the day. It's been a big day. Huge thank you to you all, and I'm really looking forward to thinking about what the next steps might look like. Thanks.